Hello gamers, my name is Spark, and today I'm going to show you an awesome one-of-a-kind tool that you can use at your D&D or other TTRPG table. In this video I'm going to show you an art generator. This is a great tool for GMs, but if you are playing a bard who does their artistic expression through art, this would also be a great tool for you as well. Be advised, I built this generator specific to D&D 5e, but with just a little bit of tweaking, you can use it for basically any TTRPG. Here's how this video is going to go. For starters, I'm going to show you the basics of how this tool works and how you can use it at your table. Then I'm going to show you what's happening behind the scenes to make the generator work and how you can customize it to better fit your campaign. As with all of my generators, it's broken down into 4 sections. There's the generate button that turns it all on. There's the settings where you can tweak results, and then there are the results themselves. And then below that, there is a storage system where you can store previously generated results. So here's how I see this being used. If your players are running around town with some downtime and you have an art gallery or an art store where they might want to peruse and look at some items, you can use this generator to fill up the shelves with what they might find there. Alternatively, you have a player who is a bard and they want to do some of their bardic magic through art. Another way I see it being used is if your players are looting maybe an expensive person's home, or a dragon hoard, or an ancient tomb, or any number of places where there may be art or artistic pieces that are being stored that your players might want to have access to. Let's start off by looking at the settings. We currently have 8 different types or categories of art: cloth, container, instruments, jewelry, music boxes, pen and brush related art, sculptures, and stained glass. You can set it to random or to custom. If you set it to custom, you'll notice that it all turns off and these checkbox systems no longer matter, and the results that you receive will be dependent upon an odds table that I will show you in the second half of this video when we get into customization. If you set it to random, then the checkboxes determine what type of art might be generated. So for example, if you only wanted to generate cloth and music box related art pieces, then you could just reduce it to those 2 checkboxes and those would be the only 2 types of art generated. You can adjust the value of the art pieces, low, medium, or high. I'll show you how that applies once we generate some results. You can also filter by the size, small, medium, or large types of art, right? This would be the difference between something that you can hold in your hand versus a giant statue or a large instrument. Again, with both of those, you can set them to custom or using random using the checkboxes. With the artist, you can set whether the artist is known, unknown, or random. And lastly, you can determine if the art piece has an exotic moniker. Let me show you what that looks like. Let's go ahead and generate some results now. So you just click the checkbox and we get a whole series of results. The exotic moniker is what you're going to see up here in these nonsensical words and characters. And you'll note next to each of these is the root language that it comes from. So for example, looking at number 3 here, this stained glass art piece is called Jolis Kit Tessunis, is probably how I'd roll it if I was at my table, and its original language is Orcish, but it's translated into Common as Virginal, and the title in combination with the original language, in combination with its description and history, are how I'm going to, as a DM, construct what this stained glass piece is going to look like. So let's jump over here to the right and look at the description. This piece is in poor condition, it has disturbing details, and is made from enchanted materials. This artist is unpopular and new to the market. They produce works often, and this piece is particularly unpopular. Now, everything in these 2 is randomly generated. If you wanted to, you could pause my video now and take a look at all of the other results to get an idea of what things change and what things are randomized. But so I, as a DM, will use these details that are provided to, if I wanted to, or if my players were curious, to describe that this might be a poorly constructed stained glass relief that seems to be depicting some type of ritualistic sacrifice to a cultish deity or power, which might explain why it's unpopular and why the artist is not well loved. You do get its sale price, as well as its size, and the author, which in this case we get their name and their race, gender, and whether they are alive or not. So this particular stained glass piece was created by Leafine Kialgalor, who is a non-binary Goliath. O stands for other, which in my world I would use to stand for non-binary, but of course you can use it however you want to, and they are still alive. And that gives you pretty much all the information for this piece of art that you can now present to your players if they're interested. So perhaps how I would play this, as my players are coming into this art store, they look around and they see some stained glass pieces, they see an elaborate chest, they see some jewelry, they see some embroidered cloth pieces, they see a charcoal drawing, they see an elaborate woven basket, they see a really intricate teapot, they see a musical instrument off in the corner, and then next to that they see a fainting couch. And so I can just kind of give them this description of what they see in the room, and then they get to investigate what sounded the most interesting to them, and therefore we're spending time on the things that they're curious about without me having to give them a giant info dump of things that they might not care about. Now, if you don't want to deal with the exotic moniker, you can just turn that off to never, and you'll notice that they are not generated, neither is the original language, because we're getting the common translation every time, and that's all we're getting. You can set it to always, or you can set it to random, in which case sometimes you'll get it and sometimes you won't. You'll notice that on some of these we don't know the artist. On artists where it says recent, this means that they recently died. So we have this one up here who's living, these other ones are all recent, meaning they've died probably within the last 100 or 200 years. Having generated a few more though, you will notice that here Sionia, the male centaur, was a historic figure, so this was an old artist, this maybe hundreds or thousands of years ago, which might explain why the piece is in ruinous condition. You might want to pause my video here and just take a look at some of the various results to give you an idea of what type of things this generator can generate. The last setting that I failed to mention is you can decide how many you would like to generate up here at the top. Right now it's set to 10. You can set 1 through 10 or random. Otherwise, that's it. This is a pretty simple generator. Let me show you how to store results. If you scroll down here into the storage system, or the museum as I'm calling it here, I have given you 4 stacks where you can save up to 10 art pieces each. So in other words, you have a place to save 40 different art pieces, and they're behind these plus expansion areas. So just click on the plus and you'll notice we open up this section where you can save art pieces that you previously generated. So how you would do that is you would come up here and you would just select all the ones that you wanted to save. Whether it was all 10 or just 1 or whatever, you would copy that, and then you'd come back down into the museum storage area. You'd right click in the top left corner of the cell that you wanted to save it into, paste special, values only. And now it pastes all that information neatly into the storage area exactly as it was laid out above. And this is now here for you forever. You can minimize this and you don't see it, but it is still there. It'll be saved for you whenever. The reason we would want to do this is because up here in the generator, these are all called dynamic cells, and dynamic cells reset themselves anytime anything changes anywhere in the sheet. So for example, if I just click over here and hit the delete key, you can see that those are randomly refreshing every time that I hit the key, which might be really problematic for you if you're hoping to save this list for future reference. And so that's why I gave you the storage system. It gives you somewhere to save it where it will not refresh. Notice as I hit the delete key now that we're down here in the storage system, nothing changes. It does keep track up here what your stack openings are. Notice that it says we have 0 openings because all of these slots are full. But if we were to delete these bottom 2, you'll notice that it says we now have 2 openings, 7 openings, 10 openings. Use the notes section to take any notes that you want to about maybe which store or which mansion these art pieces were found in. So you have access to that whenever you need it. Minimize it when you're done, and that's the storage system. And really, that's the art generator. Like I said, it's a pretty simple one. This isn't my only generator, by the way. I have dozens of others that I'm sure you'll find interesting. This table shows all the generators that I've created and which of them at the time of publishing this video have video tutorials like this one. All of my generators will have video tutorials here soon. All of my random generators are available for download on buymeacoffee.com for just a couple bucks. Links are in the description. If you're enjoying this video, now would be a great time to share it with other gamers. Please hit the like button and subscribe, it really helps me out. Let's now get into customization. It's customization that sets my random generators apart from all the others. If you're a widely experienced GM, this probably isn't your first random generator that you've ever toyed around with, but it will probably be your last, because no other tool that you've ever used has allowed you to go into the back end where all the mechanics are and tweak the master lists and the codes so that you can curate the exact type of results that you want to get. So let me show you now how to do that. Every one of my generators has a reference tab down here at the bottom. If you click on the reference tab, you'll see that we have 7 different sections, which makes perfect sense because if we go back to the generator, we have 7 different sections of the art generation as well. So you can hit the plus to expand out, and these are our 7 different types of art pieces, or 7 different categories. So there's the cloth, the container, the instrument, etc. And under each one of these, we have a list of all of the available types of art that might be present in the results of the generator. And you can add or remove to these lists however you want to. You could literally add 10,000 more items in this column, and it will randomly generate from that list anything that's in that list. So to prove it, let's go here to Music Box, and if I just type in a bunch of nonsense, and then we come back to the generator and only generate a music box, you'll notice that we have some music boxes, but we also have some of these random ones that I just created. So anything you put in these columns will potentially get generated in the results. Now, if you ever want to remove something from the list, if it's at the end of the list, you can just delete it like I just did. But if it's in the middle of the list, like let's say you wanted to delete this pendant for some reason, you could just press delete, but that leaves a hole in the list, and that's not good. That can actually ruin the functionality of the generator. So the more effective thing to do would be to right-click, delete cells, shift up. And now that deletes that cell and it shifts everything up, so now there's no hole in the generator list. So if you understand what I've explained so far, you're going to understand the majority of how customization works in this generator. Add or remove to these lists however your heart desires. So that's how you customize the different types of art. If you look at the monikers section, the monikers are all randomly created names, these exotic names that we saw over here in the results that don't have any real meaning. How do we create those? Well, we create those from these 4 columns. We have the first sound, second, third, and then a conjunction. And what it will do is, just like over here in the types and categories, it just randomly picks something from each column. That's what we've done over here with the exotic names. It'll randomly pick something out of each column and put it into a name in a certain order. And what order each of these are used is based upon these numbers. Now, you're not going to change these numbers. Do not affect these numbers at all. But if you hover your mouse over that little black triangle in the top right corner, you'll get a little pop-up. And by the way, any cell where you see a little black triangle, if you hover your mouse, you get a pop-up that gives you more information about what is happening. It's always a good idea to read those just to get a better idea of how the generator is working. Looking at this pop-up, you can see that there are 6 potential orders in which those 4 columns over here can be put together to create our random exotic monikers. And that's why they're going to look different. Like in this one, for example, is just one word, as it were, whereas this one down here has 4 different sections, if you will, to the name or the word. And so why are those 2 different? Well, it has to do with what number rolled up here, and that number's correspondence with the appropriate build. Now again, you're not going to change any of these numbers. These are all randomly generated, but that's what these 4 columns are for. And so you can add or remove to these 4 columns just like you could with the types of art pieces. Looking at the results, you remember that each art piece has its own common translation, its own mundane name, if you will. And so if you look over here in the customization, you do have your mundane columns as well. You have an adjective column and you have a noun column. And these are ordered in certain ways as well, and that's what these 10 randomly generated numbers are for as well. There are 5 potentials for orders in which the nouns and the adjectives are used. That's what those are for there. But again, you can edit this list however you see fit. But I'll say this again, do not edit any of these gray cells here in column Q. Right here we have 2 more settings that determine the odds of something to happen. So odds of exotic moniker when set to random. If we come back here to the settings, right now exotic moniker is set to always, which means we will always get an exotic moniker. But if we change it to random, then sometimes we will and sometimes we won't. And how is that determined? That's determined right here. So this is saying right now there is a 65% chance that when this is set to random, we will get an exotic moniker. You can change this percentage however you want to, just make sure that it's between 0 and 100%. Same thing over here, odds of minority exotic moniker language is 25%. So what language is the art piece's moniker going to be? That's determined by this percentage and then this table here. So in my worlds, there are the more common races and then there are the more minority races. If you wanted to do something like that, you might have your more common races listed here in this column, and then your more minority races listed in this column. And so this table here says what percentage likelihood is there that the race of the artist listed here is a minority or a common. In this case, I have it set to 25% chance. So in other words, there's a 75% chance that the artist will be of this race, or at least the exotic moniker's language will be of this race. The artist is actually over here in the next section, so everything I've been saying has just been about the exotic moniker's base language, or the minority. So you can set that, and if you want them to be equal, if you hate the idea of there being dominant races and minority races and you want to make it equal, then just set this to 50% and it will pull from both columns equally. So that's it for the monikers. If we go to the artist section, this is where we get our names. So you have male given names, female given names, and then the surnames. And if you remember back when we were looking at some of the other results, and here's another one here where the gender is O for other. When the gender is other, it will pull from either the male or the female equally. But if the gender of the artist is a male, it will pull from the male names. If it's a female, from the female. And then it'll pull surname equally. Again, you can add or remove to these lists how you see fit. Currently, the lists have about 100 names each. Here you have a couple more settings that you can tweak. Odds of artist name when set to random, 80% chance. So there's an 80% chance that when we have the artist set to random, we will get one. There's a 20% chance that we won't. You can change that setting. Odds of artist race minority, 35%. If you scroll down, here are the artist race potentials for the dominant races and the minority races. Just like I said earlier, functions the exact same. If you want them to be equal, change this to 50%. And then of course, you're going to want to tweak these lists of races based upon the world in which your game is taking place. This is the table for what the odds are of a given gender. So what are the odds that the artist is male, female, or other? Change those percentages however you wish. Just make sure they add up to 100%. Ignore all of this. This is all just functionality. This is the table for whether the artist is still alive, or recently dead, or historic. Those are the percentages right there. Tweak them however you like. And that's it for the artist customization. Let's go into the value. So here we have the art value base, meaning what is the base value of a given art piece. In this case, we set it to 45, and the denomination is going to be GP, or gold pieces. Ignore this gray section. That's just part of the functionality of the system. Here you have a table that determines the value of the art piece if it's set to custom. Again, remember, value right here was set to random, but if we change it to custom, then it will pull from this table here. It's currently set to 90% for low, 10% for medium, and 0% for high. You can change that however you want. This little box here is just to help add randomness or variety to the results for the prices of these items. So what this is this is a rand between, or random number generator between the minimum and the maximum. In this case, the minimum is -10 and the maximum is 30, which means our base value price for this art piece is going to always be 45 gold, but then a random number between -10 and 30 will be applied to that value to help generate the price of that value. But then there are additional modifiers that can affect the price of the art piece as well, and that's where we get this table right here. This is art type modifier. So for example, if it's a musical instrument, we will multiply the number. What number? 45 plus the random number between -10 and 30. We will multiply that number by 2. If it's jewelry, we'll multiply it by 3. If it's pen and brush based, or cloth based, or container based, we'll just multiply it by 1. Basic mathematics, you multiply any number by 1 and it doesn't affect its value, it stays the same. So you can adjust these numbers however you see fit. Feel free to use decimals. And then these three tables right here are affecting the price based upon the price's value, whether it's a low value, medium value, or high value item. Remember, if we come back over here, we had our low, medium, and high value items. And so if it is a low value item, it will be multiplied by a random number between 1 and 1. Or in other words, it'll be multiplied by 1. In other words, what we're saying is a low value item will receive no additional modifier to its base price. However, if it's a medium value item, it will receive a multiplier between 1 and 3. So it could be a 1, which means unchanged, but it could be a 2 or even a 3. So in other words, the price could be even tripled, but it's randomly determined. But if it's a high value item, its price will be multiplied by 3, 4, or 5. You can change the min-maxes on all of these. Just make sure that the minimum is equal to or lower than the maximum. We also have 3 more modifiers that can affect the price. We have the art size. Smaller pieces cost less, larger pieces cost more. So there's the multipliers for that. You can change that however you want. You have the artist age. So if the artist is alive, it doesn't affect the price. If the artist is recently dead, it gives the price a little bit of a boost. And if this is an ancient artist, it gives it a major boost of 2.5. Or in other words, we take whatever number we have so far, that is the price of this art piece, and we're going to multiply it by 2.5. You can change those numbers. And then if the artist is unknown, how does that affect the price? Right now it currently doesn't, it's just set to 1.0. So all of that is just to determine the price of a given art piece. And that's why when we look back over here at the results, we get things like 126, 47, 175, 16. These are all based upon all of those modifiers that we just went through. Let's move on to the custom section. And this has to do with size custom and type custom. So remember back here, we had type set to custom, and then we also had size set to custom. And in which case, when those are set to custom, we'll be pulling from these tables over here. So what are the odds that it will be a small, normal, or large art piece when it's set to custom? Those are those odds. You can change those. And then what are the odds of the type of art piece in question if set to custom? Those are the odds. You can change those too. Just as always, make sure they add up to 100%. Ignore this gray box. It is part of the function of the program. The description section. Here is this gray box that's kind of the Mad Lib, if you will, of what we're going to see over in the results. The piece is in blank condition, and then we have your list of the conditions that the piece could be in. Add or remove to this list however you like. It has adjective or ornamentation, and there's the list for there. Details, and is made from blank materials. There's your quality. Again, add or remove to these lists however you like. And the last section here is for history. There are 4 different sections for history because history is based upon the artist. And so we have artist living, artist recent, artist historic, and artist unknown. And for each of these, you get your Mad Libs, and you have your columns that you can add or remove to however you like. So if you've understood everything I've said so far, then this all becomes intuitive on how you can tweak it to produce whatever types of results you want to. And that's it for customization, and that's it for the art generator. Thank you very much for watching. Remember, I have dozens of other generators, so be sure to check them out here on YouTube or at buymeacoffee.com. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video, and happy gaming!